morning and welcome to my front yard garden here in Austin, Texas, zone 9A. This year I decided that instead of having a lawn, I was going to kill all of the grass and use the space to grow fruits, vegetables, and flowers. My goal is to be able to replace about 30% of the produce I buy at the grocery store with homegrown. And I also want to be able to grow enough to share with my friends and neighbors and also to donate a little bit to a local food pantry. So let's take a tour of my garden. Okay, this is what it looks like from the street. I am so lucky to not have an HOA in my neighborhood, so all of this is allowed. Starting off on the far left, there's a row of sunflowers. My husband planted these and they only just started blooming this week. They are so gorgeous, and I'm so glad that he did this. Moving on to the right a little bit, I have a peach tree back there and then 2 rows of cut flowers. My favorite cut flower to grow in Texas is the zinnia. They grow super well here. They love a hot climate. They are really into kind of shitty soil and minimal water, which makes them great for Austin. This is honestly my favorite part about having a garden. I come out every morning and I pick a fresh zinnia bouquet to either keep or to give away to one of my neighbors or one of my friends. If you're looking at this and you're wondering what's the deal with the string, that's actually to keep the zinnias supported and upright. So zinnias will grow very tall and get very heavy, and if you don't support them in some way, they will collapse under their own weight. I learned that the hard way last year when all of my zinnia plants fell over, and they still grew okay. They were just kind of gnarly looking. So it's better to keep them supported. The way I've done this is by using 6 metal rods and just some cotton twine. I bought all of these supplies at Lowe's and they were relatively inexpensive. So I have 2 there, 2 rods there in the middle, and 2 at the end of the street. And I've just looped the twine around. The way it works is that the zinnia stems will gently rest on the twine and this will keep them upright. Moving on from the zinnias, I have tomatoes and eggplants. So these tomato plants have gone a little bit crazy. I do have one of them in a cage, but it's gotten so heavy that it's knocking the cage over. I don't know how much longer this is gonna last. It's like about to fall over. The original plan was to build an arch between these 2 raised beds and we just didn't get around to it. And now the tomato plants are so big, we just don't have space for it. So next year there's gonna be an arch in between these 2 beds. So there's, I think, 3 tomato plants in this bed. They look crazy. And then over here I have an eggplant. If you're wondering what eggplant flowers look like, this is what they look like before they're pollinated and turn into little baby eggplants. And then this is what a little eggplant looks like before it grows up and matures. They're so cute. I also have some bush beans in this same bed, but they haven't started producing yet. And another tomato plant over here. But the real star of the show is the eggplant. And behind this bed, I have another tomato and eggplant bed. These are pole cherry tomatoes. They're a determinate variety, which means they grow to a certain height and then they stop and then they produce like a bunch of tomatoes and then they die. Other tomato varieties that are indeterminate, aka vining tomatoes, will continue growing all through the season. So they'll produce more overall. But since these grow to a certain height and then they stop, that means they can put more energy into producing fruits earlier in the season. So that's why I like growing both determinate and indeterminate varieties. So this determinate tomato is called a yellow pole cherry tomato. So once these are ripe, they're all going to be like a yellowy orangey color, kind of similar to this. This one is almost ripe. There are a crazy number of cherry tomatoes here. I have 3 plants. All of them are producing like gangbusters, just starting like in the past week and a half. I went to France for 2 weeks, and while I was there, the entire garden exploded. I swear when I left, there were about 10 tomatoes among these 3 plants, and now there are hundreds of them. Okay, this one looks pretty much ripe. Let's pick it. So this is what all of them will look like once they're ripe. We're now on the other side of the garden, so just to give you an idea of where we're at, there are the sunflowers, the zinnia rows, the tomatoes that we just picked from, the eggplant, more tomatoes. And moving on, we have even more tomatoes over here. We went a little crazy with the tomatoes this year. And we have some peppers in this bed. I actually personally really don't like peppers, but my husband likes them. So he bought a few plants for us to grow. And then in our last raised bed over here, we have more tomato plants. And actually, it looks like one of them is about to be ripe. Lots of tomatoes growing in this last raised bed, and these are obviously full-size tomatoes, not cherry tomatoes like the other ones we were looking at. So moving on from there, I have another row where I'm about to plant more zinnias. With the zinnias, I do a process called succession sowing, which means that you plant new seeds every few weeks. And this just means that you're gonna have continuously blooming plants all through the season. So as some plants that you planted earlier in the season die, plants that you've planted later will start blooming. I do have 2 zinnia plants growing and blooming already. These are volunteer plants, which means I didn't plant them. They grow on their own. Probably from seeds from last year's plants. I actually have volunteer zinnias all over the property. Like that one right there is a volunteer, and then I have another one over there, and then I also have one over there, but it's dying. Oh, and over here, so next to the actual zinnia rows, I have more volunteer zinnias, and up against the fence too. So I actually have a lot of volunteer zinnias in the yard. So speaking of the fence, I have a ton of melons growing over here, and I actually don't know what kind of melons these are because my husband planted them and then he forgot. So we're just gonna be surprised. The melons are going crazy. We grew cantaloupe last year, and I know that he planted at least a few cantaloupe vines. I'm pretty sure they're down there, but these are not cantaloupes. I'm hoping that they're honeydew. I love honeydew. Oh, that's a cantaloupe. More volunteer zinnias. They're so beautiful. These are bush beans over here. Even more zinnias. Another tomato plant and another zinnia. It's so crazy. I have so many volunteer zinnias all over my yard. And we have more melons growing along the fence leading towards the backyard. I'm gonna show the backyard in a different video, I think, because we have a lot going on back there too, and this video is already getting kind of long. Now that we're on the other side of the garden, here's what it looks like from this perspective. Anyway, thank you for watching my garden tour. I'm gonna be posting more updates throughout the season, so come back and see what the garden looks like in another month or so.